So today we're joined by Cvijeta Senta, who is Programme Council member at Human Rights House Zagreb, which is a network of organisations working on various issues ranging from youth representation, anti-discrimination, education, victims of war, mental health, and many more really important issues for Croatian society. Cvijeta, thanks for joining us on Zooming In on Hate.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So let's start off by the current state of play in Croatia at the moment. What's happening in relation to online content? Are you seeing spikes in online hate like many countries across the EU are seeing? And how are civil society reacting to this?
Yeah, well, thank you for this question. And when we look at the hateful content in Croatia today, like you said, it is very similar across the EU. It is always the minorities, visibly different people, asylum seekers and migrants and women that are targeted. But I think it is very important to not only talk about what's happening online, but how also this content spills over into the streets and into our societies in general, and also maybe how it affects the cultural life of some underdeveloped and rural areas in the context of Croatia. So I want to start by one event that really crystallized the problem for Croatia. So this summer, this folk metal pop singer Marko Perković-Thompson held a huge concert in Zagreb, and when I say huge, I mean like 500,000 people attended. For a country of 3.8 million, that's an extraordinary number, and some even say that it might broke Guinness records. So the concert didn't just happen overnight. For 3 weeks, part of Zagreb where the concert was held was partially paralyzed while the whole thing, the stage was set up. And then the images at the concert shocked many of us. People that attended the concert openly waving these Ustaša insignia, and Ustaša are the army that was connected to Nazi puppet state, independent state of Croatia during the Second World War. People were chanting fascist slogans and singing Ustaša songs, and in a whole celebrating an extremist past connected to Second World War. So the international press, for some of our listeners who follow it, described it as a Croatian Nazi Woodstock. Now, of course, not everybody that showed at this concert shared this ideology, but the size of the crowd and the normalization of those symbols gave far-right groups renewed confidence and visibility, and it was not really sanctioned by the authorities. And so when I say that this gave this push, that is exactly what we saw in the weeks and months that followed. In one smaller town of Benkovac, there was supposed to be a smaller cultural festival there about peace building, deconstructing the war and the narratives, and opening the dialogue. So nothing extreme, nothing threatening to anybody. And yet the veteran groups, joined by football hooligans, mobilized to shut it down. So the threats became so serious that the festival had to be cancelled, and the organizers described this atmosphere almost like wartime conditions. And this in a state that recently had war is really serious. Then in Šibenik, our bigger coastal city, the long-running festival was also met by the protesters. mostly also war veterans accusing the organizers of spreading hate, while they who are trying to shut down the festival, they express themselves and as they are promoting love and tolerance. So the situation escalated further when veterans publicly threatened the organizers with warlike rhetoric, and even state prosecutors launched preliminary investigations against the festival. And this also sends another layer of intimidation into the whole thing. This is a kind of backlash against public spaces, cultural spaces, and these festivals are organized to celebrate dialogue, pluralism, and art, and they're just being squeezed out of public by intimidation. And it doesn't really stop here. Zagreb saw a rise of homophobic street attacks after this concert, this Woodstock. So you had gangs that were luring gay men through dating apps, beating them, and also robbing them, and some cases were really brutal. The Zagreb Pride Association, with whom we closely cooperate, just held a press conference calling out the police to, fasten up the investigations and to speed things up. At the same time, in one neighborhood in Zagreb, groups of young people are roaming the streets with sticks and even metal rods, just attacking passerbys. And the police eventually had to step in and increase patrols. So if you step back, you see these patterns. Online hate speech that is directed to the minorities, ideological enemies, it just doesn't stay online, it mobilizes into the real life violence. And I don't know, let me be clear, this is not the majority of Croatian society, and this is far from it, but when you have 500,000 of people showing up at an event that, that normalizes the fascist symbols, that's significant in the society, and it empowers a minority to go around harassing people, shutting down festivals and attacking strangers in the streets. And so where does the civil society come into this?
Yeah, that's what my next question was. How are CSOs reacting to this?
Yeah, so in many ways we are the last line of defense. So we monitor, document, and call out these trends. We provide solidarity when these events are cancelled, and we also push institutions to react, as we saw with the Zagreb Pride Association. But the pressure is real. So, I mean, people who monitor hate speech day in day, they see things most of the society really doesn't. These are the violent posts, threats and graphic content, and this constant hostility. So it takes a toll on mental health. And people working on these are not robots, of course. So the burnout, anxiety, and even secondary trauma are real issues for those of us who work on this every day. So we tend to develop our own forms of support, like peer check-ins, internal protocols inside of the organizations, and sometimes when needed, like the professional counseling. Because if we don't really take care of the people who are doing this work, the work itself becomes unsustainable. So to sum up maybe what I said, so as mentioned, we are facing the same online hate trends as you see everywhere else. Minorities, refugees, migrant workers, LGBTIQ people, and opponents on political and ideological spectrum. But what's really especially worrying right now is this offline escalation that we have from this concert that is normalizing hate symbols to festival and other public events being shut down to the attacks in the street happening. So it's a reminder that hate speech is not, it is never just words. And when it is tolerated and when it is amplified, it becomes a threat to democratic culture, to safety, and to possibility of even living together in diversity.
And that segues beautifully, Cvijeta, into the Digital Services Act,
Yeah.
because obviously we need platforms to make our spaces, our online spaces, safe, so that we're not threatened, or that coordinating offline violence isn't as easy as it is at the moment. So the Digital Services Act is there to protect our online space and make us all feel safer online. How is implementation going in Croatia? Is your digital service coordinator up and running? Are the laws in place? Any trusted flaggers? What's happening?
Yeah, well, yeah, the DSA, well, as you mentioned, yes, it is extremely important piece of legislation, and so it is directly applicable at the moment across the EU. So technically, back home, yes, in Croatia it is already enforced, but in practice, I mean, since every member state has to adopt this national legislation to implement the DSA and to define the responsibilities, so in Croatia that process has stalled. So the law for national implementation actually went through the first reading in Parliament, and some changes were made, but it hasn't been adopted yet. And that means that these key mechanisms under the DSA, like, for instance, the appointment of trusted flaggers, they are not moving forward. But when it comes to the coordinator, the government has formally dedicated HACOM, that is the short for the National Regulatory Authority for Electronic Communications, besides everything else. So they are the digital services coordinator, but without this legal backbone, without the national legislation, they cannot really fully perform their duties. So right now they also exist in name, but not really in function. But what was interesting is that my colleague and I did a small research for the Fundamental Rights Agency on the DSA and regulation of harmful content online regarding minors. And what we found out is that courts are already sending and delivering their judgments to HACOM, to our DSA, DSC. So in that very narrow sense, we could say that system is functioning, but still some pieces of the puzzle are missing. And you can conclude that, I mean, in these regards, there is not really a lot of transparency. No public reports, no actually dialogue with the civil society, no roadmap for how this is going to work in practice for all of us. So when we are asked, like, have you seen an impact of the DSA in Croatia? The answer is not really. On paper, yes, the regulation is here, it is coming up, but no, the infrastructure is not in place, and the collaboration with civil society that is meant to happen is not happening. And this is something that matters because, as you mentioned, the whole promise of the DSA is greater accountability and transparency, not just for the platforms, but also for the state institutions on the other hand. And without that, there is really a risk that the DSA in Croatia becomes a missed opportunity, a piece of legislation that exists but doesn't really change much on the ground.
And do you have a timeline? Do you think, can you see when this might have a bigger impact on Croatian society? Do you think maybe by the end of the year, early next year, do you think the DSA will have more impact?
Well, yes. Well, let's hope that this will happen, because we are very, very late. And if I am not mistaken, even last summer, so in 2024, there was an infringement procedure by the EU opened against Croatia and some other countries.
Yeah.
But that was for not appointing the coordinator. So now the coordinator is appointed, but do we really have to wait for another infringement procedure for not following the process correctly and not implementing this national legislation? Because, you know, without this, we cannot really move forward. The trusted flaggers cannot be designated, they cannot apply for this status, and I hope, I don't know why this process is so stalled. I hope that by the end of the year something will happen, but it's only 3 months now.
And there is, of course, a concern that that vacuum, while we're waiting for the DSA to come into full effect in Croatia, is giving an opportunity to malevolent forces to make our online spaces even more difficult, push the bar even further away when it comes to safety and regulation. Yes, I agree, and this is really a worrying trend. But this is a trend. Many of the policy documents in Croatia are missing or are stalled in the process of their development, and civil society that used to be a partner during the consultations of drafting a policy or even a legislation, that is not the case nowadays. We have been pushed aside. Although we work on the terrain, we know the state of the play, and I think really our voices should be, in that sense, heard. Absolutely, and that was the essence of the DSA, was to empower civil society organisations more, to give them a more prominent position through the Trusted Flaggers programme. So hopefully some brighter news from Croatia by the end of the year.
Yeah, hopefully.
And Cvijeta, let's move on to other developments. I'm sure there's been positive as well as some negative developments in Croatia. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what's been happening.
Yeah, certainly. Well, when I take a step back and look at the bigger picture, what strikes me is the actually resilience of the civil society in Croatia, and despite all of these pressures, pressures that are coming from everyday work, like monitoring hateful content, and from all of this public hostility, political indifference. So the civil society is still here. Still, we mobilize and stand in solidarity and defend this democratic culture that we have. But this resilience shouldn't be romanticized. It comes with a cost, and that is that the space for civil society is narrowing and it is almost diminishing back home. But this is a trend across EU, so Croatia is no exception. Civil society isn't just pressured by these hate groups or ignored by the institutions, as I mentioned. It is also fabricated today in Croatia by these false allegations. So in recent months, some media, mainstream media in Croatia, ran stories suggesting corruption in civil society. These stories were based on political motives rather than on real facts, and no one ever approached any of the organization because we are very much united and we know what is happening in each organization. So there was no proper investigation that has been taken place. It is simply a narrative that is designed to discredit organizations such as ours and paint the whole sector as being corrupt and, maybe working against the state and the state interests and so on. So that's really dangerous as it moves, it delegitimizes the very actors who are working to protect the rights and hold institutions accountable. So this is very worrying for me, but then there are also some hopeful signs too. I think the CSOs are more connecting across borders through different networks, and then there are also younger generations that are stepping into activism and this kind of work. And there is still a deep reservoir of solidarity in our communities. So maybe if I was asked to kind of end and to wrap up, I would say that countering hate speech is not just about taking down these harmful posts that are online everywhere, but it is about also protecting the democratic culture offline. And civil society really cannot do it alone, so we need institutions and also platforms, if we stay in this context of online hate speech, and also communities to share this responsibility, because in the end, the fight against hate speech is the fight for the kind of society we all want to live in, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And as you say, I mean, the threats to undermine civil society, or the endeavours to undermine civil society across Europe, across the wider world, isn't just demoralising and upsetting. It's downright dangerous, because obviously civil society are there to hold government and other stakeholders to account and make sure we uphold the highest standards of fundamental and human rights. So undermining civil society, defunding civil society, just makes the prognosis pretty bleak.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah.
Cvijeta, thanks so much for joining us on Zooming In on Hate. It was really good to talk to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and greetings to all of our listeners.